President Muhammadu Buhari is opposed to open grazing of cattle. The presidency said this yesterday in an apparent effort to douse the rising criticism of its statement on Monday, quoting the president as querying the legality of southern governors' ban on open grazing. According to the senior special assistant to the president on media and publicity, Garba Shehu, who was on a Rise News primetime news program, Newsnight, many people have misconstrued the president's views on southern governors' decision to ban open grazing as an endorsement of the same archaic practice, adding that the president is only opposed to taking such a decision without preferring any practicable alternative.
The objective of the southern governors and the objective of the president are basically the same. The only difference is the approach. The president wants to see an end to open grazing. He wants to see ranching, but he wants it in a way that is organized. And he has a plan for it, and this plan will take off in June. All of these attacks that are coming, they are not coming, people just, I think, are in the mood to just exchange blows. When you read the statement, the president seeks to end the roaming of herders across the land. He wants them confined to specific places where their cattle will have the greens that they need, the fodder and the water. This is their basic need. And the president is saying, okay, this is the plan for states that are willing. People are talking about seizure of land. One particular governor is even warning, say, President, keep out of my state. Don't come here with this thing. What is all this about? I think there should be respect for the president. There should be respect for common sense.
Tundu, your views on this? 360.
No, I don't see it that way.
Okay.
I actually think that Madam Shehu is reiterating what was said yesterday. The president was talking about sticking to the plan that has been established, which is the National Livestock Transformation Plan, which does plan in the next 10 years to have 119 ranches across the country. So that is clearly against open grazing. However, the president of Madam Garba Shehu, who drafted his statement, should have resisted the urge to issue that slap on the collective wrists of 17 southern governors. That is what has muddied the waters. It is they that muddied the waters. They should just have stuck to that message of open grazing is not for the future of Nigeria. We have a plan, let's stick to that plan. But they felt the need to give that little broadside, and that is what has caused the problem. Like I said yesterday, it is completely inappropriate in a time like this with the current tensions that we have. I'm not presuming to teach Malam Shehu his job, but as the recipient of the message, as a Nigerian citizen, as somebody in the media, as a patriot of this country, I do have the right to criticize the way that it was framed, the way it was couched. And it's also not to be taken, that statement, in isolation. We have the other unfortunate statement from the Attorney General of the Federation talking about banning spare parts trading in the North, which gives credence to those who misunderstood the statement and thought it was a ban on open grazing. So the messaging has been wrong, I have to say, from the federal government. And a state like Enugu State is within their rights to ban open grazing because they are actually investing in ranches. They are breeding their own indigenous Muturu cattle in ranches. So this whole thing of, they were just throwing out a ban and they don't have an action plan is actually false. They should have a more encouraging stance because there's nothing that the southern governors have done that contradicts in any way the National Livestock Transformation Plan. It does not contradict the National Dairy Policy. And this urge to sort of leap to the defense of those who are not being attacked is unfortunate. The urge to give rights, to endow human rights onto ungulates, cows, is also unfortunate. Like I said yesterday, we are not Hindu.
Well, I think the big concern is the allegation that the presidency is biased along ethnic lines. And I think that is the big problem. I'm not too sure that the further clarification that has been offered by Malam Garba Shehu addresses that. Because the impression, the message that comes across when Malam Garba Shehu first issued that statement talking about questionable legality of the position of the 17 southern governors. The impression was that the presidency was taking that position for basically ethnic reasons. Although we made a point that the presidency may have been acting on the advice of the Attorney General of the Federation, who had made a similar statement in response to the resolutions of the southern governors. The presidency should have steered clear of that line of thinking. But what Malam Garba Shehu tried to do yesterday on television would seem to come across like some form of damage control. Because you recall that the chairman of the Southern Governors Forum, Governor Akeredolu SAN of Ondo State, had even responded that he didn't believe that Garba Shehu was speaking for the president. And he reiterated the position of the Southern governors that no piece of land will be ceded for the purpose of open grazing in southern Nigeria. The governors, under the Land Use Act, of course, are being vested with the authority for the control and allocation of land under Section 1 of that Land Use Act. But, well, for some people, the clarification offered by Garba Shehu would seem to be, a way of trying to make up. But what exactly did he say? He says the president is not opposed to open grazing, and that the president is talking about ranching and also, reviving the old cattle reserves, grazing reserves. Now consider along with that the response from the governor of Benue State, Samuel Otom, who says that even the revival of those old grazing reserves will not work because those old reserves have since disappeared with the modernization process. Now, Garba Shehu talks about plans that will be put in place in June. Well, Tundu, you said he is referring to the National Livestock Plan that was put together by the National Economic Council, what is popularly or otherwise known as Ruga. But you know that at the time that was proposed, it was also very controversial.
No, Ruga is separate.
Well, the Livestock Transformation Plan was what was defined as Ruga, because the attempt was to create grazing reserves, as you said, across the country. And the governors, like the governor of Benue, was saying that they will not give land. You will recall at that time.
Ruga was compulsory. The National Livestock Transformation, you have to willingly agree to join because everybody rejected Ruga.
But that was controversial. Whatever plans that will be unveiled in June, whether it's the National Livestock Transformation Plan or what is otherwise called Ruga, I think that should also be put on the table for open discussion. Now that, there are many voices, around the matter, particularly the 17 southern governors, the APC governors of the Southwest, it should not be assumed that those plans are already cast in concrete. The details must be discussed. And I need to state the point again, that look, people putting an ethnic label on this, should be careful because they only help to increase tension in the country, and the consequences may not be in anybody's interest. There are persons in the north who are opposed to open grazing and who have said so openly. Even the Arewa Consultative Forum said so. Why open grazing must be discontinued. An article by Tanimu Yakubu, a former chief economic advisor, said the same. These are voices from the north. So casting it along ethnic lines will be wrong. What is important is the fact that we need to modernize the ranching system. And this was the point of the governors. So it's not true to say the governors did not offer an alternative. They offered an alternative, and they called for an opportunity, to engage with the federal government to modernize the cattle grazing system in Nigeria.
I mean, thank you so much, Dr. Batiantun. It's just shocking that rather than talking about research and improvement of science in the country, we're engaging in a national discourse about cattle. But it's fine. That's all on news, and we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have Roto Today, Michael Wilson, and this one tomorrow. Talk to us on Africa Global Business, sporting activities, and COVID-19. Do stay with us. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Still the morning show right here around the Rise News channel. Oh, our dependable Rotus Odiri is here. Rotus, how are you? Okay, Michael Wilson, I should say. Michael, great to have you. Michael, good morning, Michael. How are you?
How could you confuse the two of us?
I'm sorry, Michael.
Morning.
I'm sorry, Michael.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so good morning. And inflation worries kind of fizzling out. Really, that's the headline from a rather dull day as far as the markets are concerned. One of my news editors always used to say to me, "Never say it's dull and never say it's not interesting, because why on earth are you talking about it?" Well, I'll come on to that in a second. But basically, a couple of Fed representatives in the United States have been throwing a lot of cold water on inflation expectations, and so they're saying that what we're seeing now is very transitory, and we're going to look through it. So that's this morning's view, at least, of inflation. But of course, that has not gone away, as we well know. So Asia Pacific stocks then, Asia Pacific mostly higher in today's trade. Nikkei up about 0.3%. China mainland stocks up about 0.25%. The broadest index of Asia Pacific stocks up 0.35%. Why? Don't really know, to be honest. I mean, just maybe following a slight bit of optimism about what's happening, as far as those inflation predictions are concerned. But it's all just basically treading water. China's been cracking down on cryptos again. Now, it's in reference to its Inner Mongolian region, which it proposed punishment for companies and individuals involved in digital currency mining. Now, this sounds very technical, but basically it is hugely energy consumptive to actually mine these things. If you use an enormous amount of electricity, and telecoms businesses involved in mining could have their licenses revoked. So remember, this is not GovCoin. This is not central bank digital currencies they're talking about, but it's the sort of unregulated stuff and so on. And it's this tough stance is just another chapter, really, in China cracking down on unregulated cryptocurrencies. And that, just for the record, began in 2017. So they've been doing it for some time. As far as the United States is concerned, stock futures ticking marginally higher overnight into today's trade. Dow DJ's up about 53 points. This is pre-market trade and some. Nordstrom shares down by more than 6%. This is the sort of posh shop in the United States. Shoppers showed up to its stores again to buy new shoes, sunglasses, swimwear, and so on for social outings. But it didn't actually alter its trading outlook a great deal. So it's another company which has been hit hard by consumers and the pandemic and so on, very much as you'd kind of expect. United States is now. There's a lot of legislation about to come out from the United States. I'll keep you up to date with this as the weeks unfold. But basically, we got now the. I got a competition bill coming out of the United States. And what it's trying to do is to protect its own technological and chip manufacturers in the face of competition from China. It cost about $200 billion to do this, and it's not just about safeguards. It's not just about legislation. But it's actually pumping money into high-tech companies. It's the end result of a bipartisan input, and no great surprise, it would appropriate $52 billion to US chip manufacturing and $81 billion to overhauling something called the National Science Foundation. I suspect, I'm not exactly sure of the detail of that, but I suspect it's a lot to do with R&D, which is, where America's going under Biden as we speak. On cryptos, back again, US major banks have been cautioning. Now, big banks are going to be going before a Senate committee in the United States today, but they've released some testimony before it. Bank of America, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo have all said that they are very cautious about this. It's what we were talking about yesterday, really. Doctor and I were talking, weren't we, about saying, well, if the customers are saying, we want to know about this and we want a piece of the action, you've got to do something. That's all these banks are doing. But they are cautioning and saying, until it gets regulated properly and overarching regulation, all the rest of it, then we're going to treat it with an enormous amount of caution. Back to these shores, and UK companies, rather, or companies could be restricted from listing on the London Stock Exchange if it's felt that they are somehow contributing towards a breach of national security, and so what we're going to see is a lot more looking and a lot more examination of companies which have foreign owners wanting to list on the London Stock Exchange. UK's reputation for clean and transparent investment is at stake, and we're trying to bolster this. As far as imports are concerned, it's an interesting shift post post-Brexit that now we import more from China. It's our biggest market from which we import goods. It rose 66% from the beginning of 2018. And imports from Germany, which was our biggest import market, including cars, fell by a quarter since the pandemic. Commodities. Now, finally, what I normally do is, I know that I normally go about the prices and so on, but let's just forget that for this morning. There's a very good read in the Financial Times. I'm not advertising it, but I'm just saying it's there. And it's actually about oil producing companies facing a really costly transition to net zero. The IEA thinks that producers will basically shrink to the geography of the OPEC. They'll just be the OPEC giants. 1/3, get this, 1/3 of the world's population depends upon oil revenues for its prosperity. And if that we were to move to 2050 and there to be near zero net emissions and so on, that would take that would reduce per capita income by 75%. The laggards in this include Nigeria, in other words, preparation. But look what company you're in: Oman, Kuwait, Libya, Saudi, Republic of Congo, South Africa as well. And the World Bank is saying that this opportunity now is a real chance, to shift away from oil revenues and from hydrocarbons into diversity. I mean, we've heard this 100 times.
Great insight, Michael. I read that report and it was quite very, shocking, but something that kept on ringing in my heart. And the argument will always be, the world will always find new means of revenue streams, to be able to bolster the effect. But I still want to harp on oil a little bit. I want to talk about something emerging now called the activist investors that are invested in oil companies and are forcing oil companies to go the way of green energy sources. I mean, there's been a standoff going on in Mobil and the likes as regards activist investors. I mean, what's your take on that? Are they there to make oil companies get to net zero quicker than ever before? And secondly, I want to talk about money. What happened all of a sudden? Bernard Arnault of LVMH all of a sudden became the world's richest man, and he said he made most of the money in COVID and luxury goods. So were people splurging on luxury goods in COVID, or was it the acquisition of Tiffany?
Well, I think as far as luxury goods are concerned, I mean, it's a market I have to say, it's very difficult to understand, isn't it? Because you're absolutely right. I mean, these big brands like Tiffany, LVMH, and all the rest of them, they do attract a certain clientele of very rich people. But that money is very, very mobile. Sometimes they shop, sometimes they don't shop, and so on. I think that spending patterns are far more better defined by looking at, general things like supermarkets and groceries and shopping for utilities and so on, and where households actually spend. I mean, the rich will spend money. You read these stories, don't you, every weekend in the supplements about people buying yachts motor yachts to escape the pandemic and all this kind of stuff. Flying flying with private airlines and so on. Yeah, sure they do, but that's really the top edge of things. I know that these people do own a huge part of global wealth, but I think the real patterns are not about that. It's difficult to say. I honestly don't know the answer to your question. I mean, if luxury goods would not be an indicator in my inflation basket, let's put it like that, I just wouldn't. It's too thinner. It's too thin a view on what people are actually doing. You were secondly asking me about, was it oil you wanted to talk about? Sorry, I got carried away.
Michael, let me just drop that question so Dr. Bassey can ask you a quick question. I'll drop that. We'll talk about that tomorrow.
I don't know whether we have more time. I was going to talk about WhatsApp going to a Delhi High Court today to stop the Indian government from commencing rolling out the regulations that they had said they will start enforcing today with regard to privacy regulations and the need to know the originator of information. And WhatsApp is saying, look, that's a violation of the rules of privacy provided for in the Indian constitution. Would the Indian government suspend those regulations until the case is heard? Or is this an attempt by the Modi government to divert attention from the failure of the Indian government to deal with the crisis with COVID-19 in that country? And then the infrastructure bill. The infrastructure bill. Okay.
I agree with you, Doctor. I do feel, I mean, that's the cynic in me says that that's exactly what's going on there. It's like, India being involved in a space race and China as well. It's fine, all this stuff, particularly countries like India. Apparently, we still send aid to India. Why? I don't understand why the UK does that, and companies that have got involved with India, God bless them, and he's trying very, very hard to increase it as a manufacturing nation. So, and it's got the ability to do it, no question about that. High innovation, good technical skills, and all the rest of it contrast with extreme poverty. But the fact of the matter is that until you get the basics right, and unfortunately, the basics right now are about delivery of vaccines, and until you actually do that, and we spoke yesterday, didn't we, about workers turning up at, was it Nissan Renault, not knowing whether they were going to catch COVID or not, because the employers themselves were not prepared or did not seem to be protecting the workforce. I mean, this is basic stuff that needs to be sorted out as far as these companies are concerned. So, Doctor, I'm with you. I do feel as though it's diverting attention, talking about liberties and all the rest of it. Where, I mean, I'm sure these are good concerns. Absolutely they are. But you should be looking at the basics of vaccines and how you get those into people's arms.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, Michael Wilson. Our dependable Rotu Adiri is here to give us Africa Business Update. Rotus, over to you. How's it going, my friend? Hi, Rotus.
It's going well, Rufai. Good morning to you. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Tundu. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about today. Let's quickly get into it. Doctor pretty much predicted this yesterday, right? When he went in depth on the Monetary Policy Committee. We should have the figures up for our viewers. Essentially, all parameters stayed in place. The monetary policy rate, the benchmark interest rate for Africa's largest economy, remained at 11.5%. The asymmetric corridor around the MPR stayed at plus 100, minus 700 basis points, which is just the ceiling and floor around the funds that banks place with the Central Bank of Nigeria. The cash reserve, the CRR, cash reserve ratio, that's left at 27.5%, liquidity ratio at 30%. Doctor went into this in depth yesterday. The CBN and Monetary Policy Committee is still keeping an accommodative stance. They didn't want to rock the boat, so they didn't want to tighten, they didn't want to loosen. They kept things, I think it was a unanimous decision to keep rates where they are. Looking at the MPC outcome, the governor of the central bank, Gordon Emefiele, had a very robust Q&A with the journalists yesterday. Arise News was also part of the journalists that asked him questions yesterday following the MPC outcome. He talked about insecurity. They asked him about insecurity in the nation. He said insecurity affects investments and it is necessary for something to be done. He understands. He said that his briefings with security apparatus at the federal level, they are doing what they can to try to temper down the insecurity in the nation. He also appealed to the bandits and said that, look, they should drop their arms and embrace the Anchor Borrowers program. And not to be misconstrued, he was essentially saying that employment is Nigeria's best weapon against insecurity. Agriculture, we know, employs hundreds of thousands or millions of people, including subsistence farmers who care for themselves across the nation. So he was essentially saying that bandits, drop your arms, embrace the Anchor Borrowers program, which is APB on your screen there. And it's even on, when you go through this with Emmanuel Ifeni, looking at today's headlines in This Day newspaper of record, you'll see at the top of the page there, the comments from the central bank governor. He also talked about he talked about so much, I can't even get into everything. The Anchor Borrowers program, so far about 631 billion naira has been disbursed to over 3 million farmers who have gone through about 3.8 million hectares of land. He also talked about increasing the COVID-19 targeted facility. Presently at 300 billion naira, they're increasing that to 400 billion naira. He mentioned the 1 trillion naira assistance for manufacturers. About 867 billion of that has been disbursed. He talked about the 100 billion facility for the healthcare sector. He talked about so much with respect. He talked about cryptocurrencies. They asked him if he wanted to, bask in his foresight as to restricting financial institutions in Nigeria, which was then copied by China. He said now was not the time to be basking in any glory, that what he did was to protect the financial institutions and protect the ecosystem. But he did hint that sometime in the future, Nigeria might adopt a digital currency. They're doing it in the United States, they're exploring it in the US, they're exploring it in the Eurozone, they're also exploring it in China. He talked about the states, the amount of money they're owing to the states, what they're owing to deposit money banks and the central bank. He covered a breadth of issues yesterday, but by and large, all rates held constant. He's encouraged by the economy. Oh, by the way, Gordon Emefiele also said that he sees the security situation abating towards the end of the year. And look, I have to say, he is 2 for 2 now with his predictions. He predicted that Nigeria would exit recession in Q4. I didn't believe him. A number of people didn't believe him. We exited recession. He also said that inflation would abate by May. It happened a month earlier in April. So if he's going to swing for the fences and say that, insecurity will reduce by the end of the year, he's 2 for 2. So we'll see how that goes. To oil and gas, big news in the oil and gas sector. The NNPC has signed a deal extending the oil mining lease 118 with a number of its production sharing contract partners, Shell, ENI, Total, Exxon. You can see images of Group Managing Director Mele Kyari flanked at NNPC headquarters by representatives from those international oil companies. This is about 12 years in the making, this deal, which, by the way, is going to yield the federal government of Nigeria about $780 million in almost immediate revenues. There were some issues with the financial aspects of the production sharing contracts, which is what had delayed this for about 12 years or so. But now this allows them to move forward with the deal between the parties, the production sharing contract parties, and the federal government of Nigeria. There's still, of course, the petroleum industry bill, which has to be addressed. But Mele Kyari said this is a good move for the federal government of Nigeria. This unlocks about $10 billion in liabilities for the parties involved. They can now push forward with investments, filing investment decisions for the Bonga area with respect to the deep water area. But just to emphasize, this bolsters the earlier news that we broke about Shell divesting from onshore and looking to invest in deep water offshore investments. This is sequel to that. This is essentially showing that more investments are going to be going into deep water offshore as well as onshore assets. Again, Shell divesting from there. So this deal, Shell is part of the parties to this deal. This essentially bolstered that. So it's massive news for the oil and gas sector. Again, $780 million in revenues immediate to the federal government of Nigeria. Finally, investment scams. A young man by the name of Dominic Joshua, 21 years old, has been arrested for 2 billion naira in investment fraud. You can see that he was featured in one of Nigeria's business newspapers just in October of 2020. And unfortunately, this doesn't reflect well on people in the business media space like myself, because, part of that feature pushed people to invest money with him, from Forex to, I think, other investment avenues. He was promising a 60% ROI, a 60% return on investment, which is unheard of. So this, I know doctors talked about this in the past. This is yet another example of people, please, as in local parlance, to quote unquote shine your eye when you hear about these lofty investment returns from people posing as he did, posed as an investment banker. And now he's been arraigned by the EFCC, I believe, and he's going to be sentenced soon. But it's another warning to people in this investment environment to please be careful with what's being pitched to you for investments. And that's our African Business Update.
Thank you, Rotus. I completely agree that people have to be cautious. But what are your thoughts? This is giving me Obi, Invictus, and Forbes. What are your thoughts on what this does to the credibility of the media? Should there be some kind of a disclaimer, some subtle italics with an asterisk, like some kind of, we're not quite sure, buyer beware, venture at your own risk? How should this be managed? How should we be reporting on these mavericks be managed? Because I'm sure there are some who do deserve these kinds of column inches, but not this gentleman you just featured. And that $780 million, that's a nice chunk of change. That's really great news for Nigeria. But like you said, the PIB sort of lingering in the National Assembly is becoming an embarrassment at this point. How long does it take to pass such a crucial bill? And as for the governor of CBN, here's to him scoring a hat trick. I was actually very relieved when I read him, saying that. And it's funny because he's not the security chief or anything, but speaking with such authority, that kind of, prophecy, it actually gave me some comfort. I hope it comes true.
Well, first, if I may come in here, okay, well you want to respond?
Yes,
right.
The disclaimer
yes,
or not, should there be one?
Yeah. So look, The three of you have had high-profile guests on the morning show, our flagship show on Arise TV. The three of you grill your guests. So if a financial expert was going to come on the morning show or the Global Business Report, you have to ask questions. How are you doing what you're doing? How are you making your money? So to respond to Tundu and what it does to the media, it doesn't put us in a good light. But we have to do our homework. If I was interviewing Dominic Joshua, I would ask him, how are you getting 60% returns when the stock exchange is down 4% year to date? Bonds are doing no more than 12, 13%. How are you doing 60%? So we got to do our homework. It's not a good look for business media, but you know, some of us are doing our work. So it's left to the rest of us to just carry the flag for proper journalism and proper investigative journalism for the financial side of things.
Well, while I agree that the Dominic Joshua case, Dominic Joshua of Bliss Capital, calls for introspection on the part of the media, I do not want to throw the path of media bashing. I think that, you know, the caveat emptor here, basically, is buyer beware. Now, all these Ponzi schemes, under which people promise all kinds of huge returns on investments, people should just ask basic questions. And the red flags are there in the case of Dominic Joshua. The gentleman says he's 21 years old, and he has had 11 years experience in investment. Now, 11 years experience. Did he start the investment business since the age of 10? I mean, that's, you know, a red flag. And then, of course, some of these offers, they are totally unsolicited. We've seen billboards across Lagos, yeah? People telling you to come and invest in goods, or in fish farms, or in snail farms, or in piggeries. And they will tell you that within 3 months, you will get 80% return on your investment. That in itself is a red flag. Yeah. And many of these companies, you only just need to check. Many of them are not registered anywhere. They are not registered with SEC. And you can also check the track record of the persons involved. But I guess because of the difficult times in which we have found ourselves, people are easily tempted to just hear 60% return on investment and to quickly rush and put their money there. And oftentimes, they don't get paid. And that causes a problem. So it's just a question of buyer beware, whether it's a farm or it's a goat or it is whatever. As for the CBN, yes, I mean, what came out of the Monetary Policy Committee meeting did not come as a surprise. It fed into our expectations. And it's good that the CBN is still being cautious. They want to watch what is going on with GDP growth just about 0.51%. So the growth rate is still very fragile. The economy is still fragile. We understand that. But look, yesterday, the CBN governor was talking about digital currency. And I thought when he talked about cryptocurrency, he said some are legitimate, but most are illegitimate. I thought that was, towing a moderate line. But what he said about digital currency is something we can look forward to. CBNs, central banks, elsewhere are already going in that direction in any case. But shouldn't we be worried that the CBN governor of Nigeria, does more about agriculture? He talks more about security than others who have been given the assignment. I mean, he's done the Anchor Borrowers Program. Over 5 million farmers have benefited from it. But the last time we heard from the Minister of Agriculture, Nanono, he was defending the building of mosques. So, I mean, I find it a bit disturbing that the CBN governor shows more commitment to the serious issues, to the key issues, than some other persons in government who have been given that assignment. The danger in that is that you could find a situation whereby the CBN is overstretched beyond its mandate.
I mean, is the CBN not overstretched already? And you wonder, these are the issues we should be talking about on the national scene. And what do we hear? We hear issues about cow, malu, sad. Two things I'll say. Number one, there's Advertising Practitioners Council of Nigeria that regulates ads, APCON. I think APCON should do their job even more and intensify efforts at verifying these claims, because before any ad goes on television or any media outlet in Nigeria, it goes through a vetting process of APCON. So if those spurious claims are in there, then APCON should be able to flag it from there. But one thing I see, and that saddens my heart, is that APCON have just been a money collection agency. They collect money, they certify the ad, and you put it on. I've never seen, maybe it might be, but we don't hear a lot of it, I've never seen APCON return an ad because of a spurious claim. I think it should start from there and if we start from there, then we can nip all these billboards and other things like that, and outlets at which people, interface with people. Because yes, there's a buyers beware angle, but we also have to be custodians, and the regulatory authorities have to regulate this to prevent this information to get into the public. But
Except
thank you so
that
much.
Many of those Ponzi schemes are not publicly advertised. Some of them, people get involved just by word of mouth. From friends, from families. People tell you, oh, this is something, this is a way you can make money.
Yeah, but some
and you just go into it.
Yes, Doctor, but some are so bold. They even take billboards, especially those with the agri scheme. They're so bold. And those things go through the certification of APCON before it can come up. But thank you so much for your time, Ruth. Really appreciate it. All right, welcome back. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adeso Morales. Adeso, great to have you. Good morning.
And straight to it, the coronavirus has infected over 167 million people worldwide, with more than 3.48 million deaths. There have also been a lot of recoveries, hundreds of millions of them. Globally, there have been 1.7 billion vaccinations as well, according to the Johns Hopkins University tally. Right there on your screen. The variant of global concern, the B1617, or better known as the Indian variant, thought to be highly transmissible, has now been found in 53 countries, according to the World Health Organization's latest epidemiological report for the week. Now, here in Nigeria, 37 new infections and 4 COVID-related deaths were recorded in 5 states and the Federal Capital Territory. Lagos State recorded 29 of the latest infections. An update on vaccination exercise in the country. We now know Nigeria received in total 4,024,000 doses of the AstraZeneca jab, and just enough to comfortably vaccinate 2 million Nigerians. The NPHCDA latest data shows that the first dose exercise saw 1.93 million people vaccinated, and that's about 96% of the targeted population. Now, so far, in the second dose of the first phase exercise, 8,815 people have received their second dose. Unfortunately, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but Nigeria is uncertain when the next shipment of vaccines will arrive. The earlier touted date of May or June by the authorities is no longer to be. During the press conference yesterday, the NPHCDA says the country may get, operational word there is may, get the next consignment of vaccines by the end of July or August, but there's still no confirmation just yet as they await shipment details. Now, the good news, according to Dr. Faisal Shuaibu, who is the boss of the agency, stems from the pledges made in recent days by the US to send millions of doses to COVAX, pharmaceutical firms such as Pfizer and BioNTech to provide billions of vaccines to low and middle-income countries, as well as the IMF, that's the International Monetary Fund, advocating a $50 billion fund to be spent ensuring a faster rollout of COVID-19 vaccines globally. So he says all hope is not lost. But in the meantime, he's urging everyone who has had a first dose to go get their second dose for full coverage in the country. Now, while many nations are grappling with barely sufficient supplies of COVID-19 vaccines on the African continent, others are destroying thousands of unused shots or returning them. South Sudan has become the latest country on the continent to return donated doses of vaccine after concluding it cannot administer before they expire. And health officials says 72,000 doses that are to be returned are from the 132,000 Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine received in late March from COVAX. Now, the rollout has been hampered in the country by vaccine hesitancy and major logistical hurdles, amongst other things. And finally, this morning, Moderna claims its COVID-19 vaccine is 100% effective in a study of adolescents aged 12 to 17. And the company plans to ask the US FDA to expand the emergency use of its COVID-19 vaccine for teens early next month. It is the second vaccine. It comes right after Pfizer to demonstrate high efficacy in younger age groups.
Well, the story of South Sudan is the story of many African countries. And, this is why a certain report that we discussed the other day pointed out the challenges faced by African countries. And if you look at the reasons that have been outlined in this South Sudan's case, vaccine hesitancy, right? Lack of infrastructure, financial issues, poor logistics, food crisis in South Sudan, and also rumor that the vaccine can cause impotence. That has been a major issue in South Sudan. But I think the COVAX authorities are happy that, unable to administer the 132,000 that South Sudan was given. They will return 72,000. They will keep 52,000. But in July, by July 18, when they've been able to administer the ones that they are keeping, then they will go back and ask for a fresh supply. That's a much better approach, it would seem, than Malawi, where in Malawi they even had to burn the expired vaccines. You remember that story?
Yes, South Sudan has also had to destroy some of the vaccines they received from AVAT.
Yes, and then in another country, I don't immediately remember the name, they had to return the entire, donations, and that package, that consignment was sent to Jamaica. So in Africa, we have this problem of capacity, and I hope that our leaders will learn lessons from, this COVID-19 process, the immunization process, Then in the case of Moderna, well, yes, I think it's a good development. Moderna is planning to approach the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, to get approval for this, vaccine. Their trial indicated about 100% result in terms of the efficacy for persons from 15 years old and above. And I hope if they get that through, it will help the reopening of schools process in the United States. Now that they have the Pfizer vaccine for young people and also the Moderna, whose approval for young people may take up to the next 1 month. But the data has not been made available for peer review. And, that's also very important for it to be made available for peer review. All the claims about no significant side effects, all the claims about safety rate for young people of about 100%. When, the results are peer-reviewed, I think we'll be in a safer place. As for Nigeria, you cannot be more correct. We need more information about where the next, consignment of vaccine doses will come from. The drug law and the NAFDAC, Food and Drug Administration Commission, had approved Pfizer vaccine. And then also we're told that we're looking at Johnson & Johnson. What steps are being taken to get, all these vaccines available to be able to achieve the herd immunity of 70% that the authorities had talked about at the beginning of the vaccination program?
Yeah, I mean, the targets are clear in front of us. Our authorities are saying that we have the targeted population we wanted to vaccinate in this first batch. We've done a sizable number, I think about 94% of that. But the question is, are we doing more to get herd immunity? You cannot vaccinate a very small portion of your population and hope to get herd immunity. And it looks as though we're forgetting that so quickly. Nigeria has a population of over 200 million. And for you to get herd immunity, you need to vaccinate well into the hundreds of millions. The question is, how are you going to bridge the gap? How are you going to get vaccines? And what is happening in South Sudan also shows what I always argue. It's not about intellectual property. It's about getting it right with distribution, logistics. What Africa should be saying is, how can we have vaccine hubs probably on the continent so we can produce on the continent and distribute among African nations and strengthen distribution networks. It's really very important. A lot of countries don't even have syringes. They can't take the vaccine around. They can't store. They don't have things like that. That's what we should be looking at. That should be the conversation on the table. And for me, it looks as though nobody's leading the way on this conversation. I mean, Afrexim Bank is buying a couple of vaccines. But for me, I want the money to be plowed into infrastructure too. When you look at it critically, Africa is wasting this opportunity. We're not building infrastructure. All our funds are just going to buying vaccines. If COVID finally ends, we pray it does end at some point soon, what will Africa as a continent say it had gained as regards infrastructural upgrade of its healthcare sector? Nothing. And these are the real conversations on the table that we're not having. We're just buying vaccines, shipping them, and all of that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah,
but just
we're
to add
servicing
to
other
that,
countries.
I think what South Sudan also needs, and the challenge is faced with, is that of awareness. Because the vaccines are there, so it's one thing to get the vaccines, another thing to get them into the arms.
Yeah.
So hesitancy is a serious issue, and you recall that just last week, the chairperson of the African Union and president of the DRC was saying perhaps if we have the capacity and begin to produce on the continent, people can begin to trust their own. It is what we produce, we'll surely get them into the arms. So there's that challenge of awareness. How do we tackle COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy at this time?
And speaking of that, you're very spot on, Adesua. The media is important. We should, lead the charge on this because we're fighting a war of information. There's a report, I think I saw it in WSJ or one outlet, that a PR firm was paid out of France and Germany. They paid social media influencers to discredit the Pfizer vaccine.
Well, I want to commend the hero parents who put their children forward, the teen trials, without which there will be no vaccines for teenagers. They are much better than me. I would never do that. But I'm thankful for their service to humanity. And I really do hope that the Moderna vaccine for teenagers gets the nod like Pfizer's has done.
Well, Adesua, you talked about awareness campaign in South Sudan, where the main target should be, educating the people to the effect that, COVID-19 vaccines do not cause impotence. That's the biggest threat.
Dr.
Oh my goodness.
Dr. Bati.
No, it's a statement of fact. There's that rumor there.
But why the emphasis?
But that has to be addressed.
Why the emphasis on impotence?
It's not even 9 o'clock.
But you also know that South Sudan, there's also the issue of poverty here. South Sudan is dealing with one of the worst humanitarian crises we've seen in decades. So people would rather have food, on their tables than you convince them that coronavirus is more dangerous. So there's that issue as well. There's a lot it's a mix of a lot of things South Sudan is dealing with. I dare say a lot of African countries as well.
Then Salva Kiir should incentivize them. Give them food to take the vaccine, to take the jab. You get food, you take a jab.
Yes.
Simple.
As in Serbia?
As in other parts of the world. So he knows the problem.
In New York?
Yeah, just incentivize them.
Where
and they
really
even
give them marijuana.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
And donuts and beers and free transport and tax rebates.
And tax rebates.
Thank you,
Thanks so much, Adesua.